If being selfless is such a virtue, why do the ruthless rule the world? Because the world never truly rewarded virtue. It only pretended to. Since you were a child, they told you to be kind, to be generous, to help others, to give the bigger, peace, apologize first, forgive easily, be understanding, be patient, and never say no. They dressed it up as love, as family, as community, as being a good person. But if you look closely, the ones who told you to be selfless were always the ones benefiting from your sacrifice. The teachers demanded your obedience but reserved authority. The church demanded your guilt but basked in control. Your job demanded your loyalty but offered no mercy. And your relationships, some of them only survived because you were too afraid to put yourself first. They conditioned you to associate selfishness with evil. But not all selfishness is cruelty. Sometimes selfishness is self-preservation. Sometimes selfishness is clarity. Sometimes selfishness is the only thing that keeps you from drowning in a world that never stops asking for more. You were taught to give, until there's nothing left, and then you were blamed for being empty. Meanwhile, look at who rises. Look at who dominates. The selfish, the ones who guard their time, the ones who say no without guilt, the ones who choose strategy over sentiment, the ones who refuse to be emotionally manipulated into compliance. They are not always kind, but they are respected. And in the game of power, respect is a far stronger currency than love. Society claims to hate the selfish, yet it secretly rewards them. Promotions go to those who ask. Opportunities go to those who take. Protection is granted to those who refuse to be used. While you were learning to be humble, someone else was learning to conquer. You were told to keep the peace. But who made the rules of that peace? You were told to serve, but who does that service elevate? You were told to surrender, but why does surrender always look like you losing and someone else winning? Because the world was never neutral. It's a structure built on power, and power respects boundaries. Power respects distance. Power respects the man who can look another in the eye and say, no. Selflessness, as they taught it to you, is not a virtue. It's a muzzle. It's how they keep you useful, agreeable, predictable. It's how they keep you from waking up. Because the moment you decide to protect your energy, to enforce your limits, to stop sacrificing for people who would never do the same for you, that's the moment you become dangerous, unmanageable, uncontrollable. That's the moment you go from servant to sovereign. The selfless are easy to manipulate. The selfish are hard to move. The selfless absorb guilt. The selfish project clarity. The selfless ask, how can I help? The selfish ask, why should I? And that single question, why should I, is the difference between being exhausted and being exalted. You see, most people are not afraid of being alone or broke or misunderstood. They're afraid of what happens when they stop being needed, because their identity is built on usefulness. If they're not helping, giving, supporting, pleasing, then who are they? They are terrified of becoming selfish, because, in their mind, selfish people are cold, ruthless, lonely. But in reality, the selfish are simply the ones who have learned how to stop bleeding for people who will never return the favor. Selfishness isn't about cruelty, it's about calibration. It's about realizing that energy is finite, that time is sacred, that your soul is not a public utility. They told you that saying no is rude, but what's ruder than assuming you owe someone your life? They told you that pulling away is betrayal. But what's a greater betrayal than abandoning yourself to stay liked? You don't have to be cold to be powerful, but you do have to be clear. Clarity is the foundation of power, and no one can be clear if they are constantly afraid of disappointing others. Machiavelli never wrote for saints. He wrote for rulers. And one of his deepest insights was this: it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Why? Because fear respects boundaries. Love, when unbalanced, consumes them. Society teaches you to be lovable. But to be powerful, you must first be respected. And to be respected, you must learn to be distant when needed, unavailable when appropriate, disconnected when necessary. That doesn't mean becoming inhuman. It means learning that connection is a choice, not a duty. The truth is, the world does not admire martyrs. It uses them. It builds statues of them after they're gone. But while alive, it exploits them. This is the cage of obligation, the one they disguise as virtue. But here's how you escape. You learn to say no. You protect your time. You cut ties that drain you. You let people be disappointed. You stop explaining yourself. You give when it's earned, not when it's expected. You become unreachable by those who only come to take, because the man who is too accessible will never be respected. The woman who gives without limit will always be drained, and the soul that bends for everyone will eventually break. Strategic selfishness isn't about isolation, it's about elevation. You are not meant to be everyone's safety net. You are not meant to save people from themselves. You are not meant to water deserts hoping one day they'll bloom. You are meant to build, to guard, to command. And sometimes to walk away without guilt, without anger, and without explanation, because the world doesn't remember the kindest, it remembers the strongest. You don't owe your life to those who only call when they need something. You don't owe your energy to environments that leave you empty. You don't owe your soul to systems that punish independence. Selflessness makes you a servant. Boundaries make you a king. And when you finally stop bleeding for the ungrateful, when you stop shrinking to fit in, when you stop playing small to be liked, that's when you become dangerous. That's when you start to win. That's when they start to fear you, because nothing scares the system more than someone who cannot be used. A man who can say no with no apology. A woman who can walk away without second guessing. A soul who chooses freedom over approval. And that's what they never wanted you to learn. But now you know, to rule your world, you must stop serving theirs. They'll tell you that selfishness leads to isolation, that putting yourself first will leave you alone, unloved, unwanted. But here's what they don't say. Most of your relationships were built on your selflessness, not on mutual respect, not on true connection, but on your ability to always be available. They loved your yes. They depended on your guilt. They admired your sacrifice, not because it was noble, but because it made their life easier. Remove that version of you, and watch how fast their love changes. People don't mourn the real you when you evolve. They mourn the version of you that served their needs. That's why most people resist your growth, not because they don't want to see you happy, but because your growth means they lose access to you. And access is power. When you start saying no, when you disappear, when you no longer explain, they feel powerless. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you stopped being their supply. This is what they fear most, your detachment, your indifference, your evolution. Because the most powerful thing you can do in a world built on guilt and obligation is this: become untouchable. Untouchable to manipulation. Untouchable to guilt. Untouchable to the constant demand that you prove your goodness through sacrifice. See, the moment you stop needing to be seen as a good person, you unlock a level of freedom most people will never know. Goodness is often just a leash disguised as praise, and praise is how they keep you dancing for their approval. But once you realize that nothing you give will ever be enough for those who see you as a resource, you finally understand you were never selfish. You were simply waking up. Let's talk about how power is maintained. In every system, political, religious, corporate, relational, there's one simple rule: control the generous. Reward the ruthless. Who gets the promotion? The one who demands it. Who gets the attention? The one who withdraws it. Who gets left behind? The one who gave too much for too long. Kindness without strategy becomes a weakness. Compassion without boundaries becomes a cage. And loyalty to the wrong people becomes your ruin. But they never taught you that. Why? Because the system thrives when you don't know how to protect yourself. It survives because you don't question the rules. It expands because you believe being used is the same as being loved. You were trained to perform painlessly, to swallow resentment, to smile through being ignored, to bend, to break, to burn out quietly. And when you finally explode, they call you the problem. Not the expectation, not the imbalance, not the years of emotional debt they piled on you. They will call you selfish for doing what they always did, protecting your interests. They'll call you cold for drawing lines they were never brave enough to draw. They'll call you arrogant for putting your energy where it matters most, yourself. And still, you must continue. Because greatness was never built on being liked. It was built on discernment, on filtering your time like gold, on knowing that your peace is worth more than their validation. Let them call you selfish. Let them misunderstand you. Let them walk away, because when the crowd leaves, power enters. Let them whisper. Let them label. Let them call you what they will. Selfish. Cold. Arrogant. Detached. Because they only use those words when control is slipping through their fingers. They don't fear your darkness. They fear your clarity. They don't hate your selfishness. They hate that it makes you immune to guilt, immune to obligation, immune to being someone's emotional hostage. They wanted you obedient, but you became calculating. They wanted you soft, but you became sharp. They wanted you selfless, but now you're sovereign. And sovereignty terrifies those who need you weak. So here's your final truth. You don't owe anyone your time. You don't owe anyone your kindness. You don't owe anyone your silence, your patience, your forgiveness, your life. You owe yourself everything, because no one is coming to save you. No one will hand you power. No one will reward your self-sacrifice. They'll just take it until you become a ghost in your own life, unless you stop, unless you reclaim, unless you say, no more. That one decision, to value yourself above their comfort, is the moment everything changes. Because in a world that feeds on the selfless, the selfish don't just survive, they reign. And now, so will you. So if you've made it this far, if your mind didn't flinch, if your conscience didn't scream, if instead something inside you whispered, finally, someone dares to say it, then this space was made for you. Subscribe to Mind and Empire. Because here we don't preach virtue. We study power, we sharpen the mind. We expose the game, so you can learn how to play it and win. Leave a comment if the world you thought you knew now feels like a stage. Tell me what truths you've had to bury, what masks you've worn. Because here, we do not fear the dark, we weaponize it. And like this video, not to show approval, but to send a message. That you're done being lied to, and ready to lie better. Let the others drown in sincerity. You were born to command,